During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about one of a farmer's least favorite things, mud.
Okay, now when we're talking about this, we're talking about getting into a field to plant. Is it too muddy to be out in the field, or is it not that muddy? And when we think about it, we want to run the planter out in the field, but for many farmers, they didn't get their fertilizer applied or their plant food applied last fall. They've got to get that done. They may have some spring tillage to do to kind of level that field out and make a nice seed bed. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that farmers need to get out in the field. But when we think about, well, is it too wet out there or not? It all depends on who that farmer is and what he thinks he can get done.
Yeah, but as a general statement, this is kind of what we've learned over the years. If you take your soil and you kind of try to make a mud ball, and if you can make a mud ball in your hand, it's obviously too wet.
If you can hit your brother at a dead sprint at about 50 yards out, then it's definitely too wet.
But if that soil crumbles, then we're in pretty good shape. And if you try to ribbon that out or feather that out as you're pushing that out of your hand, you get a pretty good idea. Hey, if that soil is sticking together, we've got a problem. And here's one of the issues that most people don't think about, and that is sidewall compaction or sidewall smear when a farmer's out there planting. The problem with that is you create a little V when you're out planting. Well, if you have that sidewall smear, the roots then are not able to grow through those sidewalls, and it limits where your roots are to right down that little trench. It really hurts in terms of both yield, and also it increases the lodging potential.
Well, we saw it last year too. We actually had some injury from our pre-emerge herbicides where we had sidewall smear and those trenches never really closed. So you could look right out in the field and see where the planter ran when it ran in too wet conditions, and the trench was actually open. You could see the seed. So when herbicides get applied, they actually get sprayed right onto the seed, which isn't good. You want to have a safe level of soil over the top of the seed in order to protect it from the weather, but also from herbicides that may be put on in that field.
And every farmer has a little bit different soil type. Like a lot of our ground, for example, once I see that the gravel road is fit, there's no mud at all on the gravel road, generally speaking, with many of our fields, I know I can go out in the field. And it's just a little simple thing that I've kind of figured out over the years. But we have some really heavy soils that even then I got to wait probably 2 or 3 more days. So it's just something where a farmer, after years of farming the same fields, starts to have a pretty good idea when it's too muddy or when he better just stay out of there, or when he can actually go back.
All right, here's the question though, Brian. If the crop insurance deadline that you have to have the crop in by is coming up, that's where everybody starts to panic that, you know what, let's just say for an example, in your area, it was May 20th. You had to have the corn in, otherwise crop insurance isn't going to give you 100% coverage on that field. A lot of farmers, when it gets to be May 18th or 19th, they think, man, I got 2 days of planting left. I got to get it done right now. Maybe it's good enough out there. I'm going to give it a shot.
So a lot of people will say, well, I'm just going to mud it in because I think that's a lot better than doing nothing. And that's the tough thing. Your debate is, by planting early and it's a little bit too muddy, is that better off than waiting 2 or 3 weeks sometimes? And yeah, I don't have the muddy conditions anymore, but now I'm 2 or 3 weeks later. So I wish we farmed in a perfect world, but unfortunately we don't. So those are some of the choices that a farmer has to make.
Well, it's not easy being a farmer, and especially in the spring when all farmers are excited to get their crop in the ground. When conditions aren't fit, they have to ask themselves the question, is it too muddy or
Hey,
not?
one other thing I was going to bring up real quick. We talk an awful lot about good drainage on the farm, and farmers over the years have done tillage to try to dry their soils out. Well, with tile, and when farmers are adding tile to fields and lowering the water table, that means less tillage is necessary. We're also finding certain tillage tools will create less compaction. A disc, for example, creates way more compaction in the soil, which is obviously harmful, than a Salford machine or a super coulter or a twister. One of these vertical tillage machines, they don't create near the compaction level. So you have to pick the right tillage tool in some of those cases too. There are all these things that farmers are trying to factor in every spring.
Well, one question they also may have, Brian, is will tillage help us, or will a herbicide be our solution for our weed of the week? Can you identify this week's weed?